Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update. Join the only official Telegram channel of Rao's IAS Study Circle to get relevant material and important updates. Hello everyone and welcome to Daily News Simplified, your one-stop solution to detailed analysis on current affairs which are published in the Delhi edition of Hindu newspaper and are important for UPSC preparation. Articles dated 14th of October 2021 are listed on your screen, and the timestamping for these articles is already given in the description box. So let us begin with our first article for the day. Important announcement. As there will be no issue of the Hindu newspaper on 15th of October 2021, following the same reason, there will be no Daily News Simplified on 15th of October 2021. Thank you. As today is the Thursday, and following the same trend, Rao's IAS has brought the question for weekly answer writing practice. The question says, how far do you agree that cryptocurrency is the future of currency usage in India? This question should be answered within 150 word limit. And if you submit this answer before Saturday, you will get it evaluated by the faculty at Rao's IAS. You can submit your answer on eLearn platform of Rao's IAS. So, the first article for today's discussion is based on Gati Shakti, which was given by the Prime Minister yesterday. Now, as far as this project is concerned, this plan is concerned, it is important for your infrastructure and its study for the UPSC examination. This article got published on page 11 of Delhi edition Hindu newspaper, and the context of this article says that Government of India is looking for a new master plan to boost infrastructure in India. Now, the basic objective as stipulated by the Prime Minister says that they want to make India as a business capital of the world. Now, this term could be used in your mains answer writing, in your general studies paper as well as in your essay paper. The relevance of this article comes from the fact that various government schemes related to infrastructure are important for your general studies paper in your prelim examination. From the mains perspective, infrastructure is a very important term given in the syllabus of General Studies paper 3. So, today's discussion will be based on the mains perspective of infrastructure in India. And we will discuss on what is Gati Shakti, the objectives of Gati Shakti program, and also its some of the limitations. We will look into the current status of India's infrastructure, contribution of the infrastructure, that is the role played by infrastructure in an economy. We will also look into some of the challenges faced by the infrastructure sector in India, and lastly we will provide some of the possible way forward in order to promote the infrastructure in India. So let us now understand what is Prime Minister Gati Shakti. Well, it is nothing but a national master plan. So it is part of a centralized planning for multimodal connectivity. Basically, it is focusing on the transport aspect of infrastructure. Now, the beneficiary of this program would be, of course, the people of India, Indian industry, Indian businesses, Indian manufacturers, and lastly, the Indian farmers. Why? Because there will be a greater intensity of connectivity across the nation. It would definitely help to integrate different modes of transportation as per the press release of the Government of India. It simply means that Government of India will focus on connecting the existing modes of transportation, upgrading the modes of transportation, and bringing more connectivity routes to the existing routes of transportation. Now, take the example, let's say there is a city with the name Delhi. Now, this city is connected from across the nation. However, there are other cities. Let's take the example of Gwalior. This city is situated in the central part of India in the state of Madhya Pradesh. This city is connected through railways and through roadways along with airways, right? But what about this city's development on industrial front? Is this an industrialized city? No. Why? Because the modes of transportation which this city is having is not fulfilling the demand of the industrial sector. It is meeting the demand of community transportation. That is, these three modes of transportation are involved in moving people rather than moving goods and services. Hence, the objective of PM Gati Shakti is to provide faster means of transportation and that too through multimodal connectivity. So, if we are targeting Gwalior as a city for industrial development, then airways, roadways, and railways should have their alternatives in the form of providing goods and services to the city in and out. The objectives of this program include making India as a business capital of the world. Well, this statement was used by the Prime Minister himself, so you can quote this in number of places, including your essay paper. This Gati Shakti would act as a multiplier effect on the economy. It will provide a long-term objective to the Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is also focusing on the indigenization of the industrial output. It will also focus on the extensive industrial growth. It will bridge down the regional developmental gaps. The best example here is Bihar versus Maharashtra. So, if both these states have similar infrastructure in terms of transportation, the economic growth would somehow become equalized in the long run. It will also focus on the centralized planning because the master plan will focus the entire nation, not a particular state or a particular city. It will focus on the intra-sectoral and intersectoral growth among the industrial units as well as the service sector. The best example of intra-sectoral could be the linkages between the different companies in the car industry. So if Honda wants to make a car and wants to buy inputs from the other part of the country, it will have better connectivity. Intersectoral here simply means, let's say, the food processing industry. So industries are located near the farmhouses, but they lack better transportation. So a food processing park situated in Madhya Pradesh or let's say in Maharashtra can access food items from across the other states. So it means that the industry in the food processing will get benefit from the agriculture in the other state, means intersectoral growth. It will also provide long-term planning, which was previously missing in India. Well, India has been focusing on the 5-year plan since independence and they came to an end in 2017 with 12th 5-year plan. But this kind of planning will help India to frame a long-term perspective on transportation. And lastly, it will also help India to achieve its target of getting $5 trillion GDP before 2025. However, this program also comes with a limitation. See, we are considering the limitations only from the macro perspective. The minor limitation has not been publicly made right now. Editorials have not been published on this topic because this came yesterday only. So we require a plenty of time, maybe 2 months or 3 months, for experts to come together, sit together and bring some perspective, limitations and other pointers on PM Gati Shakti. By then we have the macro points, which includes long-term planning is not well tested in the developing nations which are prone to economic shocks. We have the issues of cooperative federalism because this kind of planning requires participation from the states as well. And over centralization will kill the purpose of cooperative federalism. It also goes for the issue of financing issues because as of now, India is heavily under the economic stress of higher fiscal deficit. So providing finance to the other sector would be difficult. Then we have the changing dynamics of the economy. 3 years back, the economy was working very well. Post-COVID crisis, now it is on the downward trend. We have already been through the heavy recession last year, and so the economic dynamics is changing very fast. Over centralization of the planning has already been rejected in the past in the country. Too much of focus has been given to the industrial sector and primary sector, including the agriculture, has been neglected at a gross level. And lastly, there is a possibility of changing government and the changing policies. So whenever there is a change in the government at the center, it will change the kind of policy which they are forcing in the economy. So if we are targeting a long-term growth on infrastructure and multimodal connectivity, there should be a policy synchronization in the country as well. So given this criteria, let us look into the current status of India's infrastructure. For this, we will go through the data. The current status of India's infrastructure can well be understood through the important data set, and the very authentic data set can only be taken up from the economic survey published under the Ministry of Finance. Well, I have taken these screenshots from the Economic Survey of India this year, And these screenshots tell us the important picture and the status of infrastructure in the country. We will not go into the details of data, the numbers. We will just look into the important learnings and trends. So, the figure 25 from the economic survey shows the share of road transport to the gross value added in the country. And this figure clearly shows that the highest contribution comes from the road transportation in the GDP, followed by your railways. The next one is your air transport, and the last one is your water transport. And this is one of the reasons why government is focusing more on water transport, because it is more efficient, it is very cost effective, and it is very sustainable. On the right side, we have the road networks in the India. It clearly shows that the total number of road has been increasing in the last few decades since independence. But the reason is that in the last few years, the ratio of state highways has reduced vis-a-vis the national highways. And this is the concern which shows that the central government and the private sector at the national level are focusing more on the road development rather than the states. The next picture clearly shows us the constructions of the national highways in India. Well, it shows that in the past few years, the construction has overpassed the awards given to the construction of the road, which is a very promising sign and a good sign, which shows that the construction activity is improving, which will improve the economic sector through the development of employment. On the other side, we have the road construction per kilometer in India. And till 2019, it was increasing every year. But because of the COVID crisis, it has fallen down to 22 kilometers per day. It clearly shows that the infrastructure, especially the construction sector on the road, has been hit grossly due to the COVID crisis. Now, this shows the kind of road density per 1,000 square kilometer by states. The highest density is found in the states like Maharashtra. The lowest one is found in Jammu and Kashmir. The reason being simple, it is a hilly area. The national highway, the highest concentration is found in the states and the union territories like Delhi. On the other hand, there are the states like Maharashtra and Arunachal Pradesh where the density of state highway is more than the national highway. From this table, we can understand the role of information technology in the infrastructure. As far as number of telephones, both wireless and wireline is concerned, we can see that there are about 1175 million subscribers in the country, out of which more are in the urban areas and less in the rural areas. Ratio and number is not concerned. The contribution of the wireless is over 98% in the country, considering what we see in the telephone sector. Apart from this, there is nothing to learn about. Then we come to the status of fleet strength in the country. Well, as you can see, the number of fleet, that is the ships which carry the cargo in the country, has been fluctuating over the last few years. On the other hand, the cargo handled by the airport is also on the declining trend. Then we come to the power, because power is also part of the infrastructure. So from this table, we learn that the ratio of the state in the contribution of the power has increased considerably. On the other hand, the ratio of the private sector is falling in the downward trend. On the other hand, the ratio of the central has remained more or less similar. The energy intensity and per capita consumption has increased and decreased respectively. The energy intensity has decreased from 2012 to 2019, which means that India is on the path of energy efficiency and is rightly saying that it is fighting towards the climate change. The best example, the best contribution for this goes to the adoption of LED bulbs across the country, and the scheme which is responsible for this is Ujala. In terms of per capita energy consumption, there is a regular increase in this regard. It shows that infrastructure is acting as a catalyst in India's economic development. Now, going through the entire status, now you know about infrastructure. Now, in infrastructure, you know about roads, their status, you know about power, you know about telephony and information technology, and you know about many other important facts. So let us look into what are the important contribution or what is the role of infrastructure in economic development. The first one is that infrastructure help in generating the linkages in the production, and these linkages include both forward and backward. Infrastructure also helps in enhancing the size of market. As you can see, the rise of road sectors, which we have already discussed, has led to the expansion of the markets. So take for example, if there is no road in a rural areas or there is no road in a village, do you believe that the people who are living in a village will be able to sell their product outside? No. So once there is the connectivity of road to a particular village, the market, the products which are available in the urban centers will find their place in those villages as well. And this is one of the reasons why expansion of market requires infrastructural growth. Infrastructure also helps in inducing the FDI. So more infrastructure brings more companies, more multinationals into India that itself boosts the output, productivity and employment. It also helps in enhancing the ability to work. The best example could be your urban transportation. Better urban transportation, for example, BRTS, Bus Rapid Transport System, or your metro trains in the urban centers help people to transport from one place to the other, find employment, and earn their livelihood. It also induces the investment and the domestic demand, which we have already discussed through other points. It enhances the productivity of a labor, not only labor, but also the productivity of industries, agriculture, and the service sector. And lastly, infrastructure also promotes the outsourcing. As we have said, better infrastructure brings more multinational companies. More multinational companies, especially in the service sector, provides outsourcing services to India. Here you can write the best example of business processing outsourcing, which is very much famous in urban centers including Delhi NCR, Bangalore and Mumbai. Now, going after the contribution of infrastructure, let us look into some of the challenges which is faced by the infrastructure in India. These challenges include the fiscal burden. Both at the center and at the state level, governments are finding it difficult to provide better monetary terms to the private as well as their own companies to build the infrastructure. They have more limitations, they have more restrictions toward providing the basic health facilities in the COVID crisis. And this is one of the reasons why, despite having large fiscal deficit, government could not find space for the infrastructure. Then we have the fiscal shocks. Fiscal shocks here include the sudden outbreak of fiscal emergencies, as we have seen during the case of COVID crisis, where government could not find enough money to sustain its infrastructural growth or even to provide basic necessities to the private sector to push for infrastructure. These fiscal shocks bring more burden to the government because, first of all, they have to give up their existing projects. Secondly, they have to give up planning for the future. Then we have the issue of federal one. Non-participation of the states, frequent conflicts between the states, and fight between state and center for the resource allocation also brings constraint to the development of infrastructure. As you know, the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution has allocated the duties and subjects of the growth and development to different entities of the government. The first one being to the union, the other one to the state, and then we have the concurrent list. This distribution has also restricted the scope of the state governments to expand on those areas where center had monopoly. Then we have the rising NPAs of the bank, which we are observing since 2011. Banks are incapable to provide easy loan, long-term credit to the infrastructure companies to boost the growth. The issue of durability also lies in the infrastructure because the kind of infrastructure we are building in the country either is not long sustainable, or if they are sustainable, that they are so expensive that it becomes unaffordable for the poor class of the country. Then we have the issue of lack of interest in the public-private partnership. Over the past few years, PPP model has remained largely subjected to the whims and fancies of the politicians, political parties, and the business sentiments in the country. Now, infrastructure, which is one of the most important user of the PPP model, is finding this model to be very less in fashion. Then we have the issue of underdevelopment of corporate bond market. See, when banks are incapable of providing the credit because of the NPA, The firms which are involved in the infrastructure sector look towards the bond market. But bond market in India is already subjected to the underdevelopment. Hence, they cannot provide alternative means to the credit in the infrastructure sector. Then we have the issue of efficiency. Despite having best infrastructure companies in the country, like we have L&T, we have MGF, we have Hindustan Construction Company, and many other large players, there are hundreds and thousands of small companies involved in the infrastructure that are finding it difficult to provide best quality despite having the low budget. And one of the reasons behind this being the high degree of regulatory framework in the governance. Then we have the regional policy issues. Here I would give you the example of Tata Nano. The regional politics which began in the state of West Bengal led Tata to decide and shift its Tata Nano plant from West Bengal to Gujarat. And this is the best example to show that regional policies, the political party in power can decide the kind of infrastructure they want in a particular state, and this hampers the equitable distribution of infrastructure development in the country. We have the issue of legal and procedural ones. Well, there are hundreds and thousands of law in the country, including your labor codes, including your environmental clearances, including your land distributions and whatnot. They have been created in such a manner that promotes more interference from the government side, more regulatory and less competitive. The skewed form of FDI is also found in India. Well, 13% of India's foreign direct investment goes to the infrastructure sector as per the economic survey. And this 13% of the infrastructure is going to a very limited area. First of all, the majority goes through those infrastructure which are involved in the service sectors. Then we have regional differences. The majority of the infrastructure through FDI is being developed in 2 or 3 limited states. And lastly, we have unease of doing business. Smaller states or the poor states like Rajasthan, like Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, and even the hilly states of Himalaya like Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, or even the northeastern states are finding it difficult to bring such policies which can attract the infrastructure in their particular states, because they have their own limitations, and the top of all is the geographical constraints. So given these basic challenges to the infrastructure, let us look into what way forward do we have in terms of infrastructure development in the country. The first way forward would be to focus more on monitoring and the evaluation. How we can do this? We can go for mapping of the clearances. So once government has provided a green signal to a particular project, till the project comes into the reality, and even after that, government should have this regulatory framework to look into the quality of service it is providing and the quantity of infrastructure it has provided. We should also go for technological choice analysis. It simply means that wherever infrastructure growth is taking place, the monitoring and the evaluation should be based on the technological perspective. The best example here could be the portal of Pragati. This has provided a centralized system where government can look into the infrastructure development and can make the developer more accountable towards the public. The next reforms is the financial sector reforms, and here the priority should go for corporate bond sector. Once corporate bond sector is well developed, the need for infrastructure financing from the banking sector or from the government sector would reduce and will provide competitive financing at lower rate. We also need to go for promoting infrastructure financing. Infrastructure financing here means that we should focus more on FDI, which is going towards the infrastructure. We should also go for small funds towards infrastructure. And lastly, Government of India should also provide states to make their own funds for the infrastructure growth. We also need to go for higher efficient outcomes under National Infrastructure Pipeline, which was announced last year. Better efficiency in this macro project will provide long-term sustainable solutions to the infrastructure growth. And we require multi-stakeholder approach. Multi-stakeholder approach here simply means that both center and the state should come forward under the federalism. They should promote the cooperative federalism as well as the competitive federalism. They also require better private participation in the infrastructure development. bringing local government, both Panchayati Raj institutions and urban local bodies in the long-term planning of the infrastructure. And lastly, the planning should be the public centric, where the demands of the public, both current and in the future, should be met by the infrastructure. Few months back, there was a task force which was constituted by the ministry under the central government, and this task force was responsible for looking into the national infrastructure pipelines and its future course. This task force has provided a number of recommendations as far as infrastructure development in India is concerned. This includes your improving the project preparation processes, because better preparation means better planning and better planning means better execution. It also recommended for enhancing executive capacity of the private sector participation. Apart from this, it says that there should be ease of doing infrastructure project. See, we are focusing on ease of doing business, but what about ease of doing infrastructure? This was one of the most important suggestion of this task force. They focused more on the use of technology for both execution as well as monitoring. It focused on strengthening the infrastructure quality. As we have said, there are hundreds and thousands of firms which are at medium scale and want to work for better quality. For that, we should have better financing mechanism so that they can also increase the quality. We should also go for environmental sustainable infrastructure development. The most important conflict here seen is in relation to the national highways passing from the national parks. Such kind of conflict arises in a developing country. So, infrastructure development should also look from the perspective of the environment. The best example here could be the green buildings, which meet the demand of infrastructure growth but also meet the demand of environmental sustainability. And lastly, government should also focus on promoting competition in the infrastructure development, because promoting competition will bring better outcomes, more efficient outcomes, and development of indigenous growth. So, given all these way forwards, let us now look into the important mains related practice question. I believe after going through this entire discussion, you will be in a position to answer this question or any other question related to the infrastructure, their constraint and possible measures. So read this question carefully and devote 15 minutes of your day to write answer to this question for your mains examination. After this, I will leave you with the important prelims questions attached to this article. So read this question carefully and answer in the comment box. With this discussion in place, we will now move to the next article for the day. The next article for today's discussion was published on page 1 of Delhi edition Hindu newspaper. And this article actually talks about the recent move taken by the central government to enhance the surveillance power of border security force. Well, from the perspective of the prelims, it is important under the current affairs of national importance. And from the mains perspective, it is important under the category of security agencies and their mandate in GS paper 3. As far as content of this article, we will discuss all about the border security force, the role of border security force, and also look into the other armed police forces, but in brief. So let us start with what border security force is all about. Well, this force is India's primary border guarding organization, and it is termed as first line of defense for the Indian territory. So whenever a person crossing the international boundary and entering in India will face the border security force first. The jurisdiction of border security force goes on the Indo-Pakistan international border. See, it is not functioning on the line of control. It is functioning on the international border. And if you go through the delineated lines between India and Pakistan, you will find that international border lies in 3 states: Punjab, Rajasthan and Gujarat. On the other side of India, it is also functioning on India-Bangladesh border, that too the international border. It is also functioning along with the Indian Army, but not at that extent, in some parts of the LOC, and also providing services in anti-Naxal operations. It was created in 1965 with merging of the state armed police battalions. So these were the important battalions which were functioning across different states, and they were combined together to form BSF. The basic objective of BSF is to provide guarding functions during the peace time. See, this is the important thing, that BSF is responsible to guard Indian border during the peacetime and also provide fighting functions during the war on both western and the eastern fronts. This force can also be called during the counterinsurgency operation or anti-militancy operation. They have provided services during the internal security duties, natural calamities and many other things. Well, BSF, to your information, is one of the central armed police forces. As of now, according to the Home Ministry, there are 7 central armed police forces. The officers to central armed police forces are recruited by the UPSC through different examination. And as like many other central armed police forces, BSF is under the control of Ministry of Home Affairs. Over the past 50 years, BSF has become world's largest border guarding force. It means from the perspective of number of people who are employed in BSF, it is the largest guarding force in the world. Now one may argue that why not China has similar kind of border security force, and if it is, why it is not working as the world's largest? Well, China has deployed its army, People's Liberation Army, on its border and not the special guarding force. On the other hand, India has provided BSF and not the army on the international borders. According to the Ministry of Home Affairs, it is also provided on their website. We have these central armed police forces. Well, they are 7 in numbers, and you should have the basic ideas about all these organizations whenever and wherever they are in the news. So given this discussion in place, I leave you with this important prelims related question. So read this question carefully and answer in the comment box. Let us now move to the next article for the day. This article was published on page 14 of Delhi Edition Hindu newspaper and tells us about the situation of the aluminium industry in the country, which is actually perishing under the stress of coal shortage. Well, the industry has sent an emergency message to the Coal India and has demanded the immediate resumption of the supplies for the survival of the industry. Why? Because the industry is facing the alarming situation of coal shortage. The relevance of this article comes from the fact that in the prelim examination, questions could be asked from the aluminium industry, and in the mains examination, factors controlling to the industries in India could be asked from the perspective of General Studies paper 1 in geography. So, the context of this article will include the map-based locations for the major aluminium industry in India. We will also look into some of the factors which are responsible for locating the aluminium industry. And finally, we will look into some of the aluminium industries related issues. So let us start with this map first. I will zoom this map for you to understand it better. So as you can see, there are a number of industries which are located in the central east part of India, which includes your Renukoot in Uttar Pradesh. Other centers include your Hirakud near the Hirakud Dam. We also have another place in Odisha with the name Angul. In the areas of Chhattisgarh, we have an important mine and the industrial setup near Korba. The other important places includes your Metur in Tamil Nadu and Allupuram in Kerala. Well, these are not the locations for aluminium mining. These are the places where aluminium industries are situated. So from this map, it is easy to understand that location for aluminium industry is mostly focused on the availability of raw material as well as the areas where the coal is found in abundance. As you must have read in the NCRTs of 11th and 12th geography, that areas in Bihar, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, Odisha and West Bengal are known for coal deposits. And these are also those areas where heavy dependence on thermal power based on the coal input is found. And the basic criteria for smelting or the preparation of aluminium is the availability of power, the electricity, which is required at humongous amount to produce aluminium. And this is the reason why these industry and the plants have come together to ask Coal India to provide coal and power. Now let us look into what are the factors responsible to locate an aluminium industry. The first one is that The nature of industry is weight losing, hence proximity to the raw material is important. And this is one of the reasons why most of the mines, as we have discussed previously, are located around the raw material availability. So bauxite, caustic soda, aluminum fluoride are the basic raw materials for the aluminum industry. So the industries will be located around their mines. The second one is the effective transportation, and low transportation cost will also determine the location. Because aluminium is a metal which is heavy, and heavy transportation for long distance increases the cost, hence low cost is an important factor. These industries also required heavy availability of electricity and coal, which is one of the reasons why this demand has been put forward. They also require cheap and skilled labor, and these areas, as we have seen in the map, are well aware of such labor availability. Then we also require clusterization and development of the inter-industry linkages. Now, inter-industry linkages means that aluminium industry also require inputs from, let's say, iron and ore industry. They require steel tools and steel plants. They require transportation goods. They require linkages from, let's say, railways, the roadways, and other infrastructure inputs. So they are also based on such clusterization of development. They require, like many other industries, the capital, entrepreneurship, and the innovations. As you can see in this map, some of these plants are based on the most important industrial units, such as a company named Hindalco. We have the other company, Balco. Similarly, we have Nalco and others. And lastly, government policy, like many other industry, also defines the kind of public investment is made, ease of doing business in aluminium industry, and the FDI norms. So all these factors determine how and where the aluminium industry will be located in country like India. Now we come to the basic issues faced by the aluminium industry. The first is that production is concentrated among few players, and this is nothing but a case of monopoly or the monopolistic competition. We have the issue of rising cost, because the most important one is that there is the increase in the cost of energy. We have the issue of coal sales and other duties, and because of the rise in the regular cost of these raw materials and the important energy inputs, there is also a rise in the aluminium as such. Over reliance on the imports for the coal, scrap, and strategic material has also led to the rise in the issues faced by the aluminium industry. The most important one is that the scrap aluminium industry is very underdeveloped in India. We are focusing more on the steel industry for as far as scrap policy is concerned, but we have largely neglected the aluminium industry. And lastly, we have, of course, like many other areas, administrative issues which include delays in the environmental clearances, complex legal framework, and a frequent change in the policies, both at center and the state level. So given this discussion in place, let us now move to the important question attached to this article. So read this question carefully and answer in the comment box. This would be your question number 3. With this, now we move to the last article for the day. Well, the last article for today's discussion was published on page 11th of Delhi edition Hindu newspaper. This article talks about the recent controversy which was brought into notice by the Tea Association of India and deals around the duplicate Darjeeling tea which is being sold all over. The controversy says that there is a duplicate Darjeeling labeled tea which has created trade distortions for India and is hurting the tea industry of India. Now, Darjeeling tea is a very important tea brand and also holds the GI tag for India. If there is a duplicate Darjeeling tea being sold in the national and the international market, that is going to hurt India's interest on the agricultural front. But from the perspective of the UPSC, we are not going to deal into the controversy. Our focus should be more towards what Darjeeling tea is all about and how and why this is relevant for India. From the prelim perspective, we will read about the basics of the Darjeeling tea. From the mains perspective, it is important to understand what are the major crops in India, their locations and productions. This is important for your general studies paper 1 and 3. So, for today's discussion, we will limit ourselves to understanding everything about the Darjeeling tea, and we will also look into the tea map of India. So, let us look into what Darjeeling tea is all about. Well, this is the first product of India that has got the geographical indication tag. There are hundreds of other items which are geographically indicated in India, which includes your Bikaneri Bhujia or Tripati Laddu and many others. It means that Darjeeling tea now holds protection under the World Trade Organization TRIPS or trade related aspects for intellectual property agreement. Well, this TRIPS has already been discussed multiple times in DNS, so you can type Rouse DNS TRIPS and you can go through different links. India has also enacted the GI Tag Goods Act in 1999 as a member of or a founding member of World Trade Organization. And by this, India has also become the signatory to the provisions of TRIPS agreement. Well, as of now, GI Tag comes under the Controller General of Patent, Design and Trademark under Ministry of Commerce and Industry. And this is one of the reasons why the Trade Association of India has approached this ministry. Well, coming to the Darjeeling tea, it was the first good to receive GI tag in India. And as of now, Darjeeling tea, which is grown in and around the Darjeeling area of West Bengal, have the following types. The first one is your black Darjeeling tea, the second is white Darjeeling tea, and the third is green Darjeeling tea. Well, green Darjeeling tea is very much famous in the countries like United Kingdom and other European nations. White Darjeeling tea has a unique aroma. Both white as well as black tea are made up of same kind of leaves. The difference is that the black Darjeeling tea requires withering and the oxidation process. It simply means that the white tea or the white Darjeeling tea requires minimum processing. Minimum processing means that it is also the cheaper one. Well, Tea Board of India is a registered proprietor for GI tags under Darjeeling tea. So if Darjeeling tea and GI tag association is concerned in India or any other issue is concerned in India, it will be the responsibility for Tea Board of India. Now let us look into the basic tea map of India. In India, tea can be grown in 3 different regions. In the topmost, it is in the Himachal Pradesh or the state of Himachal Pradesh and in areas around Kangra. In the eastern side, we have the state of Assam, which is also the largest producer of tea in India. It also includes some of the areas of Meghalaya and West Bengal. In West Bengal, Darjeeling is the most important area and it is also known for the best quality of tea in the world. In south, we have some of the areas in and around the Nilgiris, which may also have some areas from Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, but the majority of the area comes from the Kerala. The best quality of tea in India comes from the northeastern part only. So with this discussion in place, now I will leave you the question attached to this article, which is also the question for the day. With this now, we come to the conclusion of today's Daily News Simplified. Thank you.